Hi there and welcome along. This is pretty much the final frontier at North Lodge. We've been here now 7 years, and this area when we first moved in was the clearest area in the garden. For those of you that have been following along since we purchased this house, it was a real mess, and this area, funny enough, was really clear. It was easy to get this area fenced in quickly and efficiently to house our flock of chickens we brought with us from Dynamite Cottage. We let our chickens go to a farm a little while ago in preparation for this area actually being changed, and this is now the final frontier. There's a huge amount of work to do in this particular area, and around a year ago, as we opened the garden to the public, I quickly put some pumpkins in here and turned it into a pumpkin patch and filled it with homegrown cosmos and other annuals. Just off to my right, there's a hedge, an internal boundary that needs to be removed, and this area is going to be opened up and turned into what I will be calling the winter garden. This is the internal laurel hedge that was planted in around 1993, we believe. The plot was divided into several sections back then with a view to actually develop it and put a couple of houses in here. Planning permission failed, and the plot then was re-amalgamated back to what we purchased back in 2018. But this laurel hedge stands along the outer edges of our drive, between our driveway and the sunken patio we built at the back end of last year. Realistically, it's a real weird divider that needs to be taken out, so I'm going to be cutting this to the floor with a chainsaw and then pulling out the root systems with my work vehicle. As soon as that internal boundary hedge is removed, the garden is going to be really flat and quite uneventful over there. However, I've got these two really big yew pyramids that I've grown from bare root plants. These came with us from our last cottage and were dug up from either side of our front door. Brought here, there was nowhere in the garden for them at the time, so they went into these large oak barrels at the front of the cottage. Over the last 7 years, they've got bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where they're now a little bit out of hand and they really need to go into the ground. These will be making their way to the new winter garden and form part of the structure over there, along with two other plants that I've been growing from seed. A garden for me is all about telling a story about where you've been and who you know, and this area in the garden is going to be absolutely no exception. I remember the first thing I ever grew as a young gardener around age 7 was actually a laburnum tree. There was one in my parents' road just down the road from our house, and it was in beautiful flower. I remember collecting some seeds around age 7. That particular tree turned into an absolutely stunning specimen by the time my parents moved from that particular house. So when we moved in here in April of 2018, down at a local church in the centre of Fording Bridge, there was a laburnum tree in flower then. I made a mental note to return to that particular tree in the autumn and harvested some seeds and grew 2 juvenile laburnum trees. Now around 5 or 6 years old, they're turning into really splendid specimens, and they need to find somewhere in the garden. These are going to be planted either side of that bark path that's been laid in the winter garden and act as the entrance into that particular area, and I'm going to form them into an archway. You can see I've been encouraging them to produce loads of lateral growth to turn them into a really lovely structure that's going to be trained over the top of that particular entrance and walkway and create a tunnel effect. I'd hoped I was going to have about 7 or 8 of these, but I've only got 2. So this is going to make part of the backdrop for that particular space as well. No garden is ever created overnight. It's a long and often expensive process. So when you get the ability to take a small shortcut and save yourself a few pennies, I always make sure that I take it. Now, the laurel hedge that was running alongside the drive was grubbed out by the digger just a few days ago. And as he worked, I managed to pull out several bits and pieces like this. Laurel quite naturally layers itself and spreads about when it's not particularly well maintained. And this particular laurel hedge had been allowed to run around a little bit. So there's plenty of really nice little layered clumps like this one. This one's quite large, it's about 5 feet high. So I'm actually going to plant them along our boundary just to fill in our hedge and give us a little bit more privacy now that internal laurel hedge has been removed. And just like that, the area is done and completed. It's been a huge amount of work and a little bit more work than I was anticipating, but what task in the garden isn't? These huge yew pyramids that were standing outside the front of the cottage, already adding a huge amount of drama and maturity to the area, to what would have been really quite flat and uneventful. It now contains 22 roses that were reviewed this time last year and a collection of winter interest plants, which I'm going to continue to add to over the next coming weeks and months, including cornus and Heleboures, to make sure that we've got winter interest all through the summer, all through the winter months. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos, and I'll catch you all again very soon. Take good care now. Bye-bye.